Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever edition of the West Coast Best Coast football show here on the Off the Mic Sports Network on YouTube. I'm Mike Mayer. Just a little background here why I'm doing this. I covered the Pac-12, the former Pac-12. It's now obviously in a new era, and we'll get to that in a second. Some big breaking news that happened today. But I covered the Pac-12 for close to 5 years on SiriusXM. Obviously, that ended at the start of this year with the dissolving of the other teams going to separate leagues. We're in a new era of college football, and I wanted to give you guys a different perspective and cover these West Coast teams that were formerly in the Pac-12 as if the league sort of still existed, and thought it would be a fun idea. We'll talk about some of the weekly stuff that goes on, and really what I want to do is kind of rank some of the best teams, talk about some of the highlights, some of the lowlights, and some of the big news across. And hopefully we'll have some special guests throughout the show, so I'm looking forward to that. So anyway, big news. The Pac-12 which was down to two teams with Washington State and Oregon State on Thursday, and the news came out late Thursday night that they are going to be adding Boise State, Colorado State, California State, Fresno State, and San Diego State to join Oregon State and Washington State. That became official according to the Pac-12. That is awesome. Boise State, I think, is an awesome addition. San Diego State is obviously with the basketball lineage. They were rumored to be joining the league when other teams had started to leave. Obviously, the USC and UCLA component of it was interesting. But yeah, Boise's a good addition. Colorado State's interesting. They've got a good football brand, obviously a decent basketball program. Fresno State, awesome football tradition as well. And then, of course, Boise is Boise's obviously one of the great group of five schools out there. The question becomes, what does this mean moving forward? Does the Pac-12, find a way to maybe add some other prominent teams? There's been rumors going around saying, oh, can Cal and Stanford, if the ACC somehow dissolves, find a way back to the Pac-12? We'll see. I don't know the legalities of that situation, but you're kidding yourself if any of the schools that went to the Big Ten, USC, UCLA, Oregon, or Washington, are going to leave. They're getting a huge amount of money to ultimately be in the Big Ten. And then the Big 12 schools, yet to be seen. If Arizona State, Utah, or Colorado kind of get cold feet at some point and ultimately want to say, hey, we want to go back to the Pac-12 in a due time. Because mind you, this isn't happening until 2026. But I think it's positive. It's nice to see the Pac-12 have some positivity around it for a change, because they were down to two schools. Washington State and Oregon State have kind of been, out there just, trying to figure things out. So this was a positive bit of news. Unfortunately, it's about 12 to 18 months too late. It would have been really nice if this would have come together, a year or so ago. And they had opportunities in 2021 to, try and potentially go poach some of the Big 12 schools after Oklahoma and Texas left for the SEC. And then you had opportunities when USC and UCLA blindsided you and left too. And you didn't want to take any of the other schools. So it came down to leadership. It sucks, because there's a lot of good people that I know that covered the league, worked for the league. Some of these schools that I'm going to cover here as if they are the Pac-12, one of the main reasons why is I got to know so many great people throughout these schools. And in a lot of ways, I root for all of them. I want to see West Coast football do well. So it's nice to see that there is a growth. We can call it the Pac-6, because it was the Pac-12. It was the Pac-10 before that. It went down to 2. Now we're back at the Pac-6, or a 6-pack. So, hey, there you go. But really exciting news there to see, and we'll see where this grows, because I feel like there's more to this story. They're not going to keep this at 16. And for those saying, oh, you know what, hey, what if this is just going to be another glorified group of 5 conference? Remember, with the new expanded playoff at 12 teams, it provides more opportunities for schools in the group of 5 to make the playoff. The highest ranking group of 5 qualifier is gonna make the playoff. So that matters. So we'll see how that goes and see how the Pac-12 wants to rebuild this league. But it's definitely something that I really wanted to see for a league that I covered for half a decade. It's A league that despite all the leadership, it sucks that it dissolved the way that it did. So, but we're going to cover it here on the West Coast Best Coast Football Show. The 12 teams that were in the previous, Pac-12. We'll talk about that, and obviously we'll try to incorporate those new 4 schools into this as we move throughout the year. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on any of these schools, but it'll be fun to sort of follow these here on this show as well. So, let's get into it. What I want to talk about really some of the big numbers, and let's start off with 17-2. That is the record of the former Pac-12 heading into Week 3 here. Only 2 losses. Colorado losing to Nebraska in Week 2, and then Stanford losing to TCU in Week 1. Those are the only 2 losses that the pre-existing Pac-12 have lost, or of the artist formerly known as the Pac-12, I guess we could call it. Still really cool to see West Coast football doing really well. 4 ranked teams: number 9 Oregon, number 11 USC, number 12 Utah, and number 20 Arizona. Really cool to have 4 teams, a third of the former league, being ranked in the top 25 and being well thought of nationally. Again, this just puts into perspective that it could have been something if they would have kept this together. But again, that's above my head, above a lot of fans of these schools' heads, that this wasn't able to stay together. But we're going to focus on the positive here. And let's do another thing that I'm going to try to do every single week. With the league being at 6, and we'll see how it goes throughout the season, I'm going to call this my 6-pack and rank the top 6 teams from the formerly Pac-12, with all these schools now scattered all over the place. At number 6, I've got the Cal Golden Bears. Shout out Roxy Bernstein and my guy Shane Vereen, who I got to work with extensively when I covered this league on SiriusXM. This is awesome. Awesome that Cal goes on the road, goes to Auburn. Fernando Mendoza has been great at quarterback. I love Jaden Ott. I love Justin Wilcox. I think he's one of the more underappreciated head coaches in America. One of the great guys in America. This is a well-coached team. And Justin Wilcox has had to deal with a lot with Cal. But nice. They get a 2-0 start. And hey, they got an interesting game with San Diego State, one of those teams that's joining the Pac-12 in a couple of years. They go to 3-0, man. Who's to say that maybe, with Florida State down, Clemson down, that maybe Cal could, be a little bit of an interesting team in that new ACC? We'll see. But I got Cal at 6. I got Washington at 5. The Huskies, whole different team, whole different coach, whole different quarterback. I don't really know what to think of them. But they face Washington State in a rivalry game. Weird that game's being played in September. Should be interesting. But Jed Fish is a really good coach. Will Rogers has a ton of experience. They really haven't been tested yet. They will be tested this week against Washington State. Arizona, I've got them at 4. I love the quarterback, Noah Fafita. I love the lead receiver, Tedoroa McMillan. They're studs. Brent Brennan taking over for Jed Fish. I thought Brent Brennan honestly had a good argument to be the coach at the time when Jed Fish got hired at Arizona. Big test for them this week, going to Kansas State tomorrow night in that big nationally televised Fox game. Not a Big 12 game, interestingly enough. So that's very interesting to monitor. I've got Utah at 3. I've got some concerns about the quarterback and Cam Rising and how healthy he is. He's got another injury. He injured his hand against Baylor, and they didn't look particularly good once he went out of the game. That's how their season got derailed last year, was once you get past Cam Rising, there's nobody there. And if Cam Rising is at least compromised, that's not good for this Utah team. He's a big reason why they can potentially win that Big 12 conference. And I love and respect Kyle Whittingham, one of the great coaches this game has ever seen. And it's a shame that it hasn't been highlighted to the degree of what he's done over his 2-decade career coaching at Utah. It's really it's unbelievable to see. I got Oregon at 2. I thought this was going to be a slam dunk that Oregon was going to be at 1, but the first 2 weeks have given me a lot of pause about where I think this team could go. Dylan Gabriel's been great. The offense scored a ton of points against Boise, but they needed a last-second field goal to beat them at home. They struggled with Idaho in week 1. The defense is struggling. Like I said, giving up 34 points in that game. So that's not at least a good sign. And they got a rivalry game against Oregon State. Oregon State's obviously going to come into that, similar to Washington State, feeling motivated about how they were kind of left aside. And this rivalry game is still being played, but it's got different meanings. So, yeah, Oregon I've got some concerns about. So I don't know. And then at number 1, I got to give credit to USC, man. through 2 weeks, they're the best team out of this previously known Pac-12. They're the best one because it shows you what one coordinator change could do to an entire team. Like, it feels like Lincoln Riley's a much more at peace calling plays. The offense looks like it's not like scared or trying to play from behind and trying to do too much and put up so many points on the board like they did last year with Caleb Williams. Miller Moss has been great. If he keeps going on the trajectory that he is going on, I could see him potentially contending for a Heisman Trophy. It's happened a lot at USC. I know it's a little bit presumptuous through 2 weeks, but hey, they get the bye this week, and then they go to Michigan. And their schedule, once you get past some of these earlier games, it's not very daunting. This is not a very, like, some of their tougher games like Penn State are at the Coliseum. So that's worth noting. So keep your eyes on USC, but I think that D'Anton Lynn hire really changed a lot of things with this program. So that's my six-pack. Top 6 teams in the Pac-12. It is Cal at 6, Washington at 5, Arizona at 4, Utah at 3, and Oregon at 2, and then USC at number 1. We'll see where all of this goes. We'll do that every single week here on the West Coast Best Coast Football Show. And lastly, what I'll do here is I'll look through these games. We'll even incorporate the new Pac-12 teams that are going to be added. Like I said, we'll follow those throughout the season here on the show. Arizona State, Thursday night game. Later here against Texas State. Arizona State, nice start to the season. They get a win over Mississippi State last week. Nothing to sneeze at, beating an SEC team, even if it was in Tempe. Like, that's a big deal to beat an SEC team. And that's what frustrates me is that the Pac-12 or the former Pac-12, these West Coast schools, are beating SEC teams. And that's been a common narrative that SEC football is better than West Coast football. And there's been some pushback on that, and you've seen it on the field. But yeah, Arizona State goes to Texas State here. This will be interesting because Texas State, since becoming an FBS team, is not a team you want to play around with. I'll take the Sun Devils here. I love Kenny Dillingham. Still some questions. They're really young, but I love the running back Cam Scadaboo. He's a heck of a talent. And this should be a great game on Thursday night. Then the Big 12 game that's not actually a conference game. Number 20 Arizona against number 14 Kansas State. I am looking forward to this. It's a primetime game. It's a standalone game on Fox, the first one since this new Friday night package was put together. Kansas State got away with one at Tulane. We're lucky. They got an offensive pass interference call that benefited them. They had a fumble picked up for a touchdown that benefited them. I'm gonna go with Arizona here. I love the quarterback, I love the wide receiver, and I love the coach. Not to disrespect, I love Chris Kleiman over at Kansas State, but there's some concerns. Like they got tested against Tulane, and it didn't look good, and they were lucky to get out of there with a win. Washington State and Washington, the Apple Cup in September, which is just bizarre to even fathom. Look, there's a lot of questions I have about Washington. Washington State's been pretty impressive. They beat Texas Tech last week, which is a big, I guess you could call it a non-conference win, even though there's 2 teams in, Washington State's conference. I'm going to go with the Cougs here, man. Like, they should have won the game last year. And that was when Michael Penix, it took a last-second field goal for Washington to win the Apple Cup, go undefeated, and ultimately gets them to the playoff in the national championship game. Ton of overhaul of talent at Washington. Jed Fish comes in, new quarterback Will Rogers. I'm going to roll with the Cougs here. I think they want to send a message to Washington that, hey, you guys left us behind, but we're still a thing. And Jake Dicker's the fucking man. I love that guy. I've gotten to interview him. I've got to meet him. He's a relatable guy. He took over an impossible situation at Washington State for Nick Rolovich, who ultimately got fired due to not wanting to get the vaccine due to Washington State law. And Jake Dicker's run with it. He took him to a bowl game. They were a 5-win team last year, but the Pac-12 was really good last year. So I think this is going to be a big statement win for Washington State. Then you got Oregon going to Corvallis to take on Oregon State. Always a fun game when the Civil War is happening. Again, still odd that this is happening in September. I like Oregon State. I like what Trent Bray's been able to do. Obviously losing a ton of talent. You lose Jaden Childs to Michigan State. Jonathan Smith obviously leaves to go to be the head coach there. DJ Uiagalelei is not that big of a loss, but hey, he was their starting quarterback last year. Damian Martinez goes to Miami. They lost a ton of talent off this team. Trent Bray is you're seeing his imprint on this roster, Jam Griffin and Anthony Hankerson both rushing for over 200 yards through the first 2 games of the season. Both have 3 touchdowns. That matters. So it'll be a physical football game. But I got to ride with Oregon. They got the better quarterback. Dan Lanning, at some point, Oregon's got to wake up from whatever the hell this first 2 weeks have been. And I think a rivalry game like this should wake them up. And Oregon should win over Oregon State. Then Utah State. Really the big concern is Utah's going to win over Utah State. Utah State's not very good. But how healthy is Cam Rising? The reports are that he's going to be good to go for Oklahoma State in their next game. He's going to be limited in emergency capacity here. But I trust Kyle Whittingham, no doubt. Even without him, even if the quarterback play is not great, Utah's going to find a way to beat Utah State. Colorado State. This is a fascinating game because Colorado is a fucking mess. They've won 2 games since starting 3-0. They beat Arizona State on a last-second field goal, and they beat North Dakota State to start this season. I believe that's 2-9 by my count since starting 3-0 and telling the whole world that they matter. I warned people before that Oregon game last year that they were going to get humbled, and they got humbled quickly, and I don't think they've ever recovered from that. I don't think they've ever psychologically recovered from that. Shedeur Sanders is not getting protected well. This is what happens when you throw a bunch of guys together that have, you don't recruit them, you don't build a culture or anything. It's just, hey, a bunch of mercenaries, we're just going to bring them in. Shedeur Sanders is throwing people under the bus. Deion Sanders is having to defend his son from all of this nonsense in the media of he wants his rap song to be played over the fight song. And the shame in all of this is Travis Hunter's one of the best players in America, and he's drowned down in this circus that is Colorado. And they're facing Colorado State, and Colorado State should beat them last year. They should have beat them. They had one in regulation. Jay Norvell should have gone for 2 in overtime. We all know the story. Jay Norvell's continued to talk a bunch of shit. They've got an NFL receiver in Torrey Horton. Braden Fowler-Michelossi is a great quarterback. He played well last year against Colorado. It's in Fort Collins. I think Colorado State's going to win, and it might get ugly. And if it does, you might point to this game as the end of the prime era, really, in Colorado. Like, he's going to last the season, but you're already starting to see how bad they looked against Nebraska. I'm really concerned about this Colorado team. And frankly, they've done a lot of this to themselves because they got out of the horse in front of the horse way too early. And then they, like I said, 2 wins in their last 11 games since that 3-0 start. Indiana at UCLA. I like Deshaun Foster. I think he's going to bring a lot of energy to UCLA after the Chip Kelly era. But Indiana's really good, man. And I love Kirk Cignetti. They scored 77 points against a nothing team, but still that means something. And I think Indiana's going to want to come on the road, send a message saying, hey, you want to join the Big Ten out in the West Coast? They're going to come into the Rose Bowl, and I think Indiana's going to beat them. And in these situations, I often side with the coach, the more experienced coach. And all due respect to Deshaun Foster, it's only his second game of college football. And UCLA did not look good against Hawaii. They needed a last-second field goal to beat Hawaii in Week 1, and they only scored 16 points. San Diego State's at Cal. I like the Bears here. Like I said, they're number 6 in my rankings. If they get to 3-0 and they go into ACC play, maybe they can make some noise. That league's wide open this year. Miami's probably the favorite right now because of Cam Ward and the talent that they have on that roster. But I don't trust Mario Cristobal. I just don't trust him. So Cal's an interesting team. They'll beat San Diego State. And then for fun here, we'll add New Mexico State and Fresno State. Fresno State joining the league, obviously, in 2 years. I got the Bulldogs winning this one, the Fresno State Bulldogs winning this game. It's a shame that Jeff Tedford's not going to be able to join this league. He obviously had to step down again due to health reasons. But Fresno State's a really good program. I'm really excited to see them join the West Coast in this new version of the Pac-12. So yeah, that's the first edition of the West Coast Best Coast football show here on the Off the Mic Sports Network here on YouTube. Hopefully going to have some great guests. Dan Lynch, my boy from Pac-12 Radio. Hopefully we'll get the band back together, get some conversation going on here. You'll love our conversations, and I'm really excited to bring that to y'all. And we'll do this every week. West Coast football is still a thing, even if the Pac-12 doesn't exist. I want to highlight that. And obviously, with the big news that they added 4 teams to make it the six-pack is great. So like, share, and subscribe to the channel here. Follow the channel at OT Mike Sports. And follow me at Off the Mic 28 if you want to get my wrestling takes or any other opinions. Talk to you guys real soon. Thanks for listening and watching. I love you. And West Coast is the best coast.